Planning meeting. Just checking that we are correct. Today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by way of the Council's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you'll see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using a public seating area, you consented to be filmed and to be possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Proposed public speakers have been made aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to this meeting. Would members please use their microphones to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphone when you have finished. Members dialing in remotely, please turn on your camera for the duration of the committee as requested by the Planning Department. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the committee and that any devices are on silent? Thank you. Sorry, can we please have any apologies?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. That's it. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest to bring forward? No? Okay, we'll move on to the minutes of the previous meeting on pages 3 and 4. You have a review? Yes? Sorry, Councillor.
I'd just like to note that my name appears under apologies and I was definitely here.
Okay. Taken. Okay, can we approve those minutes? Yes? Approved. Okay. We'll now go on to the planning schedule from pages 9 to 75. Okay, we'll bring on the first item. Bishton and Langstone. Well, Councillor Ray Mogford and Councillor Rheoli. The construction of an annex and link walkway with storage and work from home space. The main considerations were the scale, appearance and design and impact on the local visual amenity. The original recommendation is for refusal. We have one public speaker, which is S. Johnson, and the presenting officers are Grant Hawkins, Senior Planning Officer.
Thank you, Chair.
Speaker first.
Sorry, members. Just before Grant does his presentation, members online. There's been a handout that's been circulated to members in the chamber. You're obviously online, so I've just emailed that to you. If you could check your emails, please, just to make sure that you've got it. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. This application seeks planning permission for the construction of an annex and link walkway with storage and work from home space at Ridings View in the Langstone and Bishton ward. A pre-application inquiry was submitted prior to the submission of this application, and the Council raised issues with the location, scale and design of the proposal. The scheme being presented today has not been considered to overcome the concerns that were raised. Members who attended the June Planning Committee will recall that this application was called by and presented to members at the request of Councillor Mogford in order for the committee to consider the visual impact of the proposed development. During the June meeting, members did not move to the officer's recommendation. No decision was made, and a proposal was agreed for the application to be brought back to the next available committee with a suggested conditional regime. The July committee report pack includes a short report providing advice to committee on the recommended use of planning conditions, should members be inclined to approve the application. It should be noted, however, that the officer's recommendation of refusal does remain the same, and the presentation will outline the officer's assessment of the application for the benefit of members who were not in attendance at the June committee, and as a recap for those members who did attend. The application site is a converted barn known as Ridings View, which forms part of a barn conversion complex of 4 units located east of Bishton Road. At the time of conversion, the barns were located outside the settlement boundary and within the countryside under the Newport Unitary Development Plan. Under the current Newport Local Development Plan, the site is located within the village boundary of Bishton, as shown on the right-hand side image on the slide, and is now located within the settlement on the rural-urban fringe. The site is accessed by a shared private driveway serving the barn complex, and this is the most eastern unit. It is a garden boundary enclosed with a low post and rail fence along the open along the open countryside, and directly north-east of the site are 2 public rights-of-way. The closest runs west to east across the field directly neighbouring the site at a distance of approximately 45 metres. Further north, the second right-of-way runs northwest to southeast at a distance of approximately 145 metres. The eastern side elevation of the garden of the property are visible from the 2 rights-of-way, with unobstructed views across fields available. The group of buildings are typical of barn conversions of a very traditional appearance and distinct layout. The material is comprised of stone with timber cladding, and the roof is covered in natural slate. Under the previous conversion, the simple character and linear form of the barns has been maintained, and none of the barns have undergone significant extension or development. The group of barns have retained their high quality character and appearance and offer a positive contribution to the visual amenity of the local area. So here are some site photographs taken during the previous site visit. I won't explain each photo, but as you can see, they sort of show the garden space and the adjacent barn, views out across the countryside, bottom left, and the other western elevation of the barn in question. This photograph taken shows the views available from the furthest public right-of-way at a distance of approximately 145 metres. At the time of undertaking the site visit, it was not possible to access the much closer public right-of-way from Bishton Road as it was blocked. This has been reported to the Council's countryside wardens, who are investigating. As you can see, there are clear and unobstructed public views across the field available to the application site and to the neighbouring barns. The proposal will be visible across this vantage point and along the rights-of-way. The proposed annex is located to the east of the existing barn and is linked by a flat roof extension. The proposed building would measure approximately 5.5 metres wide by 13.2 metres long and would have a height of 2.5 metres to eaves and 4.75 to the ridge. External walls will be stone and roof tiles slate to match the main building. Fenestration comprises of single pane windows and doors across elevations and bifold doors in the northern end elevation. The overall extension, including the link, is approximately 70 square metres, which would result in an approximate 44% increase to the 160 square metres footprint of the existing converted dwelling. The internal layout comprises of an open-plan living room and kitchenette, a hallway that leads to the bathroom and bedroom, and at the south end, accessed separately, is an office and storage space. The application advises that it would be the applicant's elderly mother who would occupy the annex, and that it has been designed around their wheelchair requirements. The storage would be used for their personal possessions, and the office would be a work-from-home space for the family of the main dwelling. Policy H7 sets out the 4 criteria for annexes to residential dwellings to be assessed against, and this is set out in full in section 7.2 of the main officer's report. The annex is entirely capable of operating independently of the main house, with all of the facilities required for day-to-day living being provided. Supporting text to Policy H7 explains that even self-contained annex must support a house in some way, not function independently of one, and a degree of dependency must be demonstrated in the plan and supporting information. In this case, we were advised that the proposal will function as an annex, and this is taken on face value. The proposal will be located within the same planning unit, share the existing garden, access and parking arrangements, and therefore, on balance, would comply with Policy H7. Policy GP6 is quality of design and advises that good quality design will be sought in all forms of development. The policy sets out several fundamental design principles that should be addressed. Of key note in relation to this application are the following. All development should be sensitive to the unique qualities of the site and respond positively to the character of the area. Where possible, development should reflect the character of the locality. New development should appropriately reflect the scale of the adjacent townscape. Care should be given to avoid overscale development. The House Extensions and Domestic Outbuildings SPG states that a house extension or a domestic outbuilding should relate sympathetically to the existing building and the surrounding area. Although the site now falls within the defined urban boundary, its context remains influenced by the rural origins of the existing buildings. The site lies on the urban edge and retains an open rural character. When viewed from the adjacent public right-of-ways, the eastern elevation of the barn presents a simple and understated form, contributing positively to its architectural quality. The proposed extension would compromise the simple form of the barn, projecting beyond the established built envelope and encroaching into the open rear garden area. The garden directly joins the open countryside, reinforcing the site's sensitive setting and positively contributes to the semi-rural feel. The proposed building, including a link extension, by virtue of its location and scale, would erode the simple linear form of the existing barn. The extension's windows and doors appear overtly contemporary, comprising single-pane window openings and bifold doors, for example, and add to the appearance of the building as an incongruous addition to the property, which is clearly visible from public vantage points and within a rural context. The proposal would introduce a visually intrusive element that extends the built form of development onto the boundary with the open countryside. This would not only undermine the character and appearance of the host barn conversion, but would also appear at odds with the context of the wider complex, which is defined by a simple and linear formation. In short, the proposal is inappropriate scale and design and is contrary to policies GP2 and GP6. In terms of the impact on other aspects, such as parking and neighbouring amenity, the proposal is deemed acceptable. At least 3 parking spaces are available in line with the parking standards, and the extension itself does not contribute to any adverse impact on neighbouring properties, such as loss of light or overbearing impact. Chapter 6 of Planning Policy Wales states that planning authorities must seek to maintain and enhance biodiversity in the exercise of their functions. A green infrastructure statement has been submitted with the planning application in order to describe how the green infrastructure has been incorporated into development. This follows a stepwise approach, and whilst an area of lawn would be lost to the proposed development, the scheme includes planting of a hawthorn hedge to the eastern boundary of the site, as well as 3 additional planting areas and bird and bat boxes attached to the building. This is an acceptable enhancement and the proposal complies with Policy GP5 and PPW12. So overall, to conclude, the reason for refusal as per the officer's report is the development by reasons of large-scale unsympathetic design and location will have a significant adverse impact upon interests of acknowledged importance, namely the character and appearance of the host building and the surrounding area, contrary to policies GP2 and GP6 of the local development plan. However, should members wish to approve planning permission, then it is suggested that the conditions contained within the reports pack relating to the approved plans and documents, a scheme of soft landscaping, bird and bat box implementation, provision of parking, external materials and annex use control are to be included within any conditional regime. Thank you.
Okay, I'll open it up to the public speaker. 5 minutes.
Excellent. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Thank you once again for the opportunity to speak today. I'd first like to express our continued appreciation for how thoughtfully the committee has engaged with our application. I want to begin by briefly summarising where things were left off at the last committee meeting in June, in case some members were not present at that time. At that meeting, the committee voted against the officer's recommendation to refuse our application. The outcome of the committee members' subsequent motion was a clear request that the application return to the committee only with suggested planning conditions with a view to granting approval. So it is somewhat surprising to learn that the officer's recommendation to refuse again is the starting point today. From our understanding, the previous vote had already moved the application into the approval phase, and today's meeting was expected to only focus on the proposed conditions. However, we fully respect the process, and we are here again today to participate constructively. Since June, we have reviewed the suggested planning conditions very carefully, and I'd like to confirm on behalf of my family that we fully support them. They are reasonable, proportionate, and reflect exactly what we have set out right from the very start. This annex is simply to support my mum's care needs. The condition restricting the annex to be used only as part of the main dwelling and not as a separate home or rental is entirely appropriate, and we welcome it. As you may recall, my mum, who is 75, has both Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Her health is deteriorating quickly and she can no longer safely live alone in Pembrokeshire. I'm her only child, and after my dad passed in October, my mum requires around-the-clock care and support. The annex will allow us to care for her in a safe, adapted space while maintaining her dignity, independence and connection with her remaining family. The annex is very carefully designed to meet her specific medical needs, including wheelchair accessibility, wider circulation spaces and appropriate facilities for her care and dignity. In fact, the size of the annex, which is just 42 square metres, is smaller than the Council's own minimum space standard for a one-bedroom flat, as set out in their own design guidance. We fully engaged with the planning process and officers who visited the site, which resulted us in reducing the size of the plans by 58% compared to the original plan. The location was very carefully selected, with a design in character with the original barn and using complementary materials, avoiding harm to the architectural integrity of the building. We understand that the physical and functional link between the buildings is a key element and requirement to make the annex application compliant with the Council's policy, which we have endeavoured therefore to incorporate. I would stress that the eaves, the heights, the matching stone, the roof, the finishes all match the existing barn. Specific design and location were all handled carefully via the architects to ensure that it is not seen from the road and is tucked behind the existing barn in the exact same linear form. For context, the site was originally a working farm with large agricultural buildings occupying much of the garden area until very recently. The suggestion that this is an untouched area of open countryside is misleading. Furthermore, the wider area includes Landwind Steelworks, Mega Brewery, main railway line, wind turbines, power pylons and significant existing infrastructure, all of which are visible from our garden. There is an ongoing live planning application for a large-scale solar farm in the adjacent fields, which will have far more greater visual impact than our very modest annex. The annex has no objections from any technical consultees, including highways, drainage, ecology, natural resources or archaeology. There have been no neighbour objections, and importantly, Councillor Mogford, who knows the site well, has given his full support to the application, describing it as presenting little or no adverse visual effect. At the last committee, all of the members voted in our favour for the planning to be agreed. We're committed to delivering the landscaping and ecological enhancements requested, including the native hedgerows, biodiversity measures and soft screening. We understand how important that is to ensure the annex sits comfortably within its surroundings. We're grateful for the thoughtful and compassionate engagement this committee has shown, and we sincerely hope that today's meeting will conclude this matter with a vote again to approve, subject to the proposed conditions. This would allow us to begin preparing our home and lives for the care that my mum so urgently requires. Thank you again for your time and for your public service.
Thank you. I open the debate up for the members. Any questions? No? Oh, one. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not on the floor. It's just the way the seats are made. Chair, I have concerns about this in regards to the officer's recommendations, because the conditions which we asked for seem to apply, yet they're still refusing the application. I'm also concerned in regards to the comments in regards to the refusal, the large-scale unsympathetic design and the location. Well, the design matches all the other buildings, so I can't see how that is unsympathetic. The large scale, I think it was 42 metres is mentioned, and that is a reduction of what the original plan was. In regards, namely, the character and the appearance of host buildings, okay, I agree with that. In regards to it's very similar to that. The surrounding area, contrary to policies GP2 and GP6, the surrounding areas, you've got a big steelworks within a mile of the place, and you've got a brewery, you've got wind farm or wind turbines. I can't see how this is going to be unsympathetic. In my opinion, it will be an improvement to a certain extent. The only thing that I won't say I got concerns about is the walkway visible from any areas at all. That's the only thing that really that I have concerns about.
Okay, thank you for your comments. First of all, I'll start just to address the recommendation aspect. So, obviously, last time, committee didn't move to the recommendation to refuse. Not a problem. The judgment of committee was that it was sort of moving towards it being more acceptable. We were asked, more often than not with these sorts of applications, when there's like an overturn from refusal to approval, the powers would be delegated to officers to come up with a conditional regime, and that would be signed off under delegated powers. In this instance, last committee, it was requested the application comes back with suggested conditions for the committee to consider and to then sort of vote on. So that's what we've done. In terms of the recommendation, from ourselves as officers, our assessment is that, for the reasons set out in the report, we don't feel this is acceptable. Now, of course, that is our judgment, and it is your role as the planning committee to form your own judgment on the application. So as officers, our recommendation hasn't changed. For the reasons set out within the report, we do feel this is unacceptable. However, it is obviously the committee voting on this and not ourselves. The reason the application has been sort of come back to the planning committee with a full presentation, for example, and the recommendation refusal, is because it wouldn't be sort of acceptable or transparent, I suppose, if we asked members to vote directly on the conditions when there are members here today that weren't present at the last committee. So in terms of transparency and giving those members the opportunity to understand the application, ask questions, etc., this is obviously why it's been presented today back in this form. And that was the legal advice that we were given when we touched base on this, to make sure we were correctly presenting this and that we obviously couldn't be challenged for being unreasonable or not following the correct procedure. So hopefully that clarifies that point before I move on to the others. Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. And then your next points regarding your judgment that the design, scale, location, etc., is acceptable. That's fine. That's your judgment. It's predominantly a sort of a design visual impact assessment that the key issues are here. In terms of the size of the annex, the actual size of the annex itself, we don't have an issue with. It's accepted against policy H7. We've outlined that within the officer's report. We've assessed that against the criteria. It's the overall impact, because obviously we haven't just got an annex, we've got the office extension and the storage as well, looking at the cumulative impact of the overall scale and location and size of the building, which is greater than 42 square metres. The annex itself is about 42 square metres. I think it's about 70 square metres all in when you include the link extension. So it's about a 44% increase on the footprint of the existing dwelling, which is somewhere around 160 square metres. So yeah, I think that answers the two questions. But as I said, we've made a judgment based on our thoughts and views on the acceptability of the application. We will make that recommendation to you as committee, as we always do, and it's obviously down to committee to form their own judgment, which is their right to obviously either agree with our recommendation or not, as the case may be.
Councillor Rheoli.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to legally try and challenge the advice that's being given, but concentrate again on refocusing our thoughts on the application before us. And for those members that weren't with us last month, yes, committee never actually voted to refuse it. It was voted on to send back, to bring back to committee with recommendations for approval. I think that has been met, even though procedure may be looking in a different way. And I thank the officer for bringing the proposals and conditions forward as he did. The recommendation for refusal on the annex perceived prominence being unsympathetic and bulky design, contrary to policies GP2 and GB6. However, I believe this assessment overlooks crucial details and merits a more nuanced interpretation. So firstly, the annex serves a vital purpose to provide essential, accessible accommodation for an elderly family member requiring care. This isn't just an arbitrary extension. It's a design specifically built to take into account the pressing needs, fulfilling policy H7's criteria for supplementary dwelling. Secondly, the design itself demonstrates a clear commitment, in my opinion, to sympathy with the existing barn conversion. Proposed materials, matching stone and roof tiles, and a direct effort to integrate the structure seamlessly. Whilst the report criticises the contemporary windows, these choices directly support the accessibility requirements of the user, and this is actually a critical consideration. The concerns regarding visual impact from the public rights of way are addressed by the proposed landscaping. The green infrastructure statement includes new native hedge planting specifically intended to screen the annex. The proactive mitigation acknowledged by the landscaping department as having no objections in principle should be given significant weight. This is a balanced approach. This application is well considered proposal that balances essential family needs with a design that strives for integration. It utilises the appropriate materials and offers practical solutions to mitigate any visual concerns. I think that I looked at this, as you all know, as committee members know, and again to be absolutely transparent, this lies within my ward. And I've fulfilled every criteria that will allow me to speak and vote as a member of the planning committee, even till today. I've been out of the country for 2 weeks, so there we are. But there we are. It fulfills the Welsh Government's policy of a lifetime dwelling, and the encouragement we get to have planning work hand in hand with encouraging looking after loved ones at home, rather than sending them elsewhere to be looked at. For me, again, I have no issues with accepting the conditions that have been outlined, and I thank the officers for doing that, and I have no problem in refusing this application and then going forward with the alternative view. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Grant, for the presentation. my first couple of points, to be honest, have been really well covered already by Councillor Watkins. I was going to bring up this phrase of large-scale and sympathetic design and location. Grant has used the word judgment a couple of times already in his responses, and it is exactly that, isn't it? It's a judgment, and I've got to be honest, I'm more than happy to approve or refuse planning applications based on factual information. When it comes down to a matter of personal judgment, I think that's a little bit more difficult to say. You know, to refuse something based on a personal judgment that can vary from person to person, I'm not quite so sure about that one. One question I would like to ask, that this is one of these judgment calls. There's a reference made to the linear design of the barn and the change from that with the annex being added to it. Now, bearing in mind what was said earlier about the other infrastructure in that area, the steelworks, the pylons, and all the other things, the wind farm, etc., etc. I'm just wondering, why is that particular aspect seen as being so important? I mean, from looking at the pictures and the comparisons from the roadway, to me it looks like an improvement. I'm not really sure why it's seen as a big problem, so I wouldn't mind a bit of extra comment on that one. The only other comment I want to make really is, obviously I'm extremely sympathetic from a human point of view about the care aspects for the applicant's mum, and you know, if I was in a situation I would probably want to do exactly the same thing, so I'm not unsympathetic. I'm just a little bit concerned that as a planning committee, is this something that we should be considering? Do we have the expertise in this committee, and do we have the actual prior knowledge in this committee to make that a consideration? I mean, for example, the lady lives in Pembrokeshire at the moment. Now, we don't know the background to that, why she lives in Pembrokeshire, how long she's lived there. Have Pembrokeshire been approached from their point of view about providing care for this lady? You know, we're talking about providing care for the lady in her community. Well, from the information we've got, it seems that Pembrokeshire is her community, not Newport. But that's only my summation based on what we've been given. So I'll go back to my original point, really, that we don't have the information at the moment to make a judgment on that. And I'm not sure whether that should be something that as a planning committee we should be considering. You know, we've got to look at the actual application itself, the design. So I suppose the question I'm asking, going back to what I said at the linear design, why is that seen as being so important? Because to me it seems to be an improvement. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no problem. I will just clarify on the annex point first of all, just before we move on to the design element that you've raised. You know, from our perspective, we're satisfied that there's policy H7 which looks at residential annexes to dwellings, and it sets out, I think, 4 criteria that an application would need to demonstrate that they've complied with. As we've concluded in the report and as touched upon in my presentation, we are satisfied that in this instance, how we've been told it will be used is the case of a genuine annex. There's a functional link, there's a familial link, there's a shared access, shared garden, those sorts of things we were touched upon. So from that perspective, we are satisfied. Obviously, we have to take each application on it, case by case and on its own merit. But in this instance, we're not sort of, as officers, we're not debating the merits of the annex itself. But obviously, that's for yourself as committees, obviously, to consider at the same time. Moving on to sort of the design layout and appearance, you've referenced the linear form. What I'll try and do perhaps is show this. Oh, sorry, I have to skip back through. Okay, so what you've got, this aerial on the left-hand side is potentially the clearest way of showing this, because it's sort of the site layout has been sort of computer generated over the top and overlaid. The existing barn, as you can see here, it's set into sort of 3 or 4 different sections. There's 4 units that were converted, or 4 or 5 units that were converted under the Unitary Development Plan at the time. The site was in the countryside. This is, a very sort of typical agricultural, existing agricultural building. It's of high design quality, high architectural merit when you look at the materials, detailing, etc. The layout is very simple. It's very clean. The form is, it's very straight line, as you would expect, a sort of a high quality sort of existing rural layout such as this. The proposal, obviously, we've got along the red line here, along the eastern boundary of the site. This is the my cursor's lagging, but that edge there that is the boundary. That is the Bishton village boundary along with the countryside. So beyond this, you are in the open countryside. The proposal extends the property, the built form of development, and the envelope of the built development almost to the boundary with the countryside. So at the moment, you've got a very open, sort of untouched garden, which translates nicely into the open countryside. What you will have as a result of this development is a new extension which sort of juts out with that link extension and then extends, sort of north to south direction in close proximity. So you're losing sort of part of that simple open garden, that very rural sort of character on the fringe there. In terms of the extension itself, we do consider it to be quite large. You've got a very clean existing eastern elevation to that barn, which, as I said, has been converted to a high standard. The barn conversions in the complex sort of retain its original form previously and have done since it was converted. This would obviously change that. You'd lose that original form. You'd lose that sort of clean linear pattern of development. That's sort of the high level sort of overview of how we've assessed this and our thoughts on this. I've mentioned judgment today, as you've rightly highlighted. When you are looking at design visual impact, there is an element of judgment. It's not like a parking guidance where there's X number of parking spaces and it's in black and white. We've discussed this internally. When I was looking at this application and assessing it following site visits, we looked at this as officers, and I took this to a meeting of officers at principal level and management level within the department, and we all discussed this, and we all came to the same conclusion. That is our judgment as sort of planning officers, but as I've mentioned, as committee, it is your role to form your own judgment. We will give you our recommendation, our professional advice, but ultimately it's down to you to form your own judgment on the acceptability or not of such an application.
Thank you, Grant. Councillor Howells.
Thanks, Chair. We find ourselves in a strange position, I would argue, because the committee were pretty clear last time that they didn't agree with the officers' recommendation, and I understand why the officers have brought back the report, but I don't think it was the committee's intention for you to bring back a recommendation for refusal. I think it was a recommendation for conditions, which you have done in part 2 of the report, but because we've had a significant change of committee from last time, we've got a different chair and 4 people that didn't attend last time and some who did attend last time that didn't. We're ending up going over old ground here. The committee, in reality, made a determination last time that they didn't agree with the officers' recommendations to refuse and the conclusions which the officers reached. So I feel like we're kind of litigating old ground here, and we ought to be moving on and pressing on with the recommendations that are in section 2 of the report to approve the planning conditions, which I think is what the sort of planning officers expected to happen. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So it's a fairly painful process for the applicant. The committee could have last time sent officers away and just said formulate some grounds. We've done that, as you pointed out at the start of these submissions, many times, and I think that we were trying to be helpful in bringing it back to make sure we get the right grounds, and we've ended up running you through a second ordeal unnecessarily, in my view. So I personally think we ought to get on and deal with the parts in section 2 of the report, which are to approve the application with the proposed conditions in section 2. And forgive me, Chair, I won't list them out because they're clear in the report. I just wanted to pick up on a point which Councillor Reynolds made, which might contradict myself slightly, but he talks about sort of overturning a recommendation on subjectivity, effectively, if I summarise that, and we employ planning professionals who do lots of professional training to kind of to make those judgments for us and make recommendations, and we don't overturn those lightly. It's not very often you come here and we don't agree with you. On this occasion we have, but I think I would caution a note to say I won't turn things over if they're subjective, you know, because we normally rely on your recommendations. So I just wanted to make that point from your perspective, really.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? One?
No, I don't think there's anything really to add there. No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cox.
I'm obviously coming at this fresh because I wasn't actually at the last meeting. I was away. And that there are several points I want to make. One is that I feel very strongly that we should get the context of the application, the sort of geographical context, clear, because we're talking about a development out on the levels. And the levels are an absolutely unique environment, that is well acknowledged. And the actual shape of the villages and the layout of the villages and their disposition and the field patterns around them are absolutely crucial to understanding the history and appreciating the history of the levels. And I know it's been said that, well, you know, why are we worried about a view when you can see the steelworks? Well, with respect, that sort of tower on the steelworks, you can see it for miles. I mean, if we decided that because we can see the steelworks, that overrode a whole series of other planning regulations, I think we'd end up in a very, very strange situation. So I actually think whether you can see the steelworks is totally irrelevant. We're talking about a specific village that plays a specific part in the history of the levels. And I think that there really need to be, if we are going to discount that and make an exception, that I think we need to have very, very strong grounds for doing that. And to be quite frank, I'm not convinced that we have. I mean, when I finish, I would be interested, one thing, for example, to know is to what extent would we be setting a precedent on the levels if we allowed the usual considerations in terms of the character, the scale, the design, etc. We're allowing the usual objections of those to be overridden. Is this a one-off, or may this happen again? Are we creating a precedent? I think that'd be interesting to know. The other aspect of this that I really can't understand is that the basic fundamental objection is the scale, the design, alters the character of the view of Bishopton from that particular location. That to be quite frank, I just can't see how the conditions, you know, that we are now being asked to consider to allow this to be approved, I can't see how those actually overcome the basic objection which the officers have to this proposal. The only basically I have a fundamental issue in understanding just why we are deciding to overturn the officer's recommendation here. I just can't see the really impelling reasons which would cause us to do that. And finally, that this is a sensitive issue, I know, and one thing I can talk about with enormous confidence is having a family member and managing a family member who is suffering from really advanced Parkinson's. I've done that. I've got the T-shirt on that. I know what it's all about. And so I've every sympathy with the family who are making the application here, because I understand what the issues are. But you know, we're talking about here, you know, we talk for people with certain diseases and disabilities perhaps need certain adaptations. We're not talking about an adaptation here. We're talking about putting up a building that may be there for the next 200-300 years. And again, I'm really concerned about each time we come across an application that has maybe got some very, very moving personal circumstances. Again, that overrides normal planning applications. I mean, with respect, if we followed that line of thinking through, it would shoot an absolute, massive hole through our whole ability, actually, to have some sort of planning control over the environmental, the environment that we're responsible for. So basically, that's where I am. I see absolutely where the officers are coming from, and I really do struggle to see why we are making an exception to those recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to touch upon your first point with regards to sort of like precedent and things like that, I think what probably is key in this instance to identify, this site is within the urban boundary, the Bishton village boundary as per the local development plan, albeit as I've referenced, it is very much on the periphery, it is on the urban rural fringe. If there were an application in the future at another site within the levels that was not in the urban boundary, i.e. it would be countryside, then there would be a higher level of national and local planning policy protection. So, for example, strategic policy 5 in the local development plan is the countryside, and underneath that you've got other local policies such as H12 or 13, which is extensions to dwellings in the countryside. There are then different policy thresholds and different considerations that we would have to look at for those applications if they were within the countryside. In this instance, it's a little bit different because, as per the plan, it's within the boundary. So some of those, it's not technically countryside because it's within the Bishton village boundary. However, it is very much rural in its context. It is on the fringe. It is right on the boundary and will be extending the built envelope of the development to the boundary with the countryside. So some of those higher level countryside policies aren't explicitly relevant to this application because it's not located within the countryside. However, there's still your design visual amenity policies which need to be understood and read against the context of the development. So policy GP6 is probably the more crucial one here, which talks about being sensitive to the surrounding area, the context, etc., which we've referenced in the report and the presentation. And then policy GP2, which looks at general amenity, visual amenity, etc., which we also referenced. So in terms of concerns moving forward, different applications with different locations, different policies to assess against, I suppose, is the sort of high-level summary on that point. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity with regards to that. Totally take your point with regards to the surrounding wider context, Llanwern, other buildings that have been referenced today. Yeah, we've looked at this. We've talked about scale. We've talked about sort of the size in the report and in the presentation. That's within the scale of the development, within the immediate context, within the barn conversion, which we consider to be a high-quality design, and that sort of linear form that we've referenced and the layout. If you were to look at the scale of this extension versus the scale of Llanwern Steelworks, however many metres away, then clearly different context, different. You can see it as you've referred to, but just because you can see it doesn't mean it's critical to the to the immediate context of the application and the assessment. So I think we've been quite well. We tried to be quite clear in the officer's report how we've assessed it, why we've assessed it in the way that we have, and from my perspective, that's sort of the recommendation and the assessment that we've made as the planning officers to you as committee today. Final point with regards to the annex and sort of personal circumstances. I don't want to say personal circumstances aren't a material planning consideration because they need to be given context, but we have to assess the use of the annex against policy H7, which we have done, and we're satisfied that on balance the proposal has demonstrated compliance with policy H7. So, irrespective of sort of the very, very sort of unique personal circumstances of an applicant or family members, which we can't delve into too much really when making that assessment, we are satisfied that it will meet the criteria of being an annex if it is used as the way they say it's being used. I accept that, the annex will be there for a significant period of time, and the way it's used in the future potentially could change slightly. But obviously we're assessing the application against the information that we have got and that's been presented to us.
Thank you, Grant. I don't see any more hands up at the moment. We now move to the vote on the officer's recommendations and the conditions attached.
Yeah, sorry, just before we vote. So we've explained why, as officers, we think the proposal is unacceptable. And we understand at last committee, members were of the view the proposal was acceptable. That's absolutely fine. As Grant has alluded to, our recommendation remains the same. So from a procedural perspective, we need to start off with a motion on the officer's recommendation, which is to refuse. If that's not passed, then someone can suggest a different motion, given reasons, which I suspect will be that they consider the appearance and scale to be sympathetic and acceptable, and then we can move on to the actual conditions if members want to go down that route. So the first vote will be on the officer's recommendation, if it's moved and seconded.
Okay, so we'll move on the vote. Sorry. Is there a proposer and a seconder for the officer's recommendation to refuse?
Those in favour?
No, is there a seconder? We've got the proposer and a seconder for the No? Okay. Okay. The motion has failed. Now we move on to the second motion. Councillor Howells.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to propose that the application is recommended for acceptance in line with the conditions that are laid out in the officer's report at section 2. There are 3 conditions, I believe, which are all laid out. The applicants have confirmed their content with them. They seem reasonable and appropriate. So I'd like to propose that we move forward on that basis.
There are 6 conditions. Yeah.
Sorry, 6 conditions, sorry.
Okay, have we got a seconder? Okay, Councillor Jordan. Okay, we'll move to the vote on that motion. Sorry, yeah. All those in favour? All those against? No abstentions? Okay, thank you. That's now carried. Thank you. When I leave. Okay, moving on. Second item on the agenda, page 32 to 39. Application number 25/0058. The site is a Unit 3A to 3B, Nashmead, Newport, South Wales, ME 194SU. The ward member is Councillor Howells and Morris, Sterry and Peterson. The proposal is for a reconstruction of a fire-damaged portal frame building, and this is a retrospective application. The main considerations are the design, visual impact and green infrastructure. The officers recommended granting with conditions. Could Officer Vicky Quinn please present the... Yeah. Oh, it's Grant, is it?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rheoli, can I just double check your hand showing us up on the Teams meeting? Could you either pop it off or if there is something you need to clarify? And you're on mute. Sorry, Councillor, you are on mute. Sorry, you're still on mute. I have to sign this one. Councillor Rheoli, if you can hear me, can you just raise your real hand? There we go. Right. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm gonna continue then, unless there's any issues with that. I'm assuming you won't be able to lower your hand on there for one reason or another. Okay. Bear with me. Ooh. Sorry. Yeah. 2 seconds. There we go. Sorry, too many presentations open. There we go. Right then. So this application seeks planning permission for the reconstruction of a fire-damaged portal frame building at Unit 3A and 3B, Nashmead, in the Liswerry ward. The application is retrospective and the building has been fully constructed on site. The proposal is presented to Planning Committee as it constitutes major development owing to the floor area of the building being greater than 1,000 square metres. The local planning authority has undertaken full public consultation, including neighbour letters, a site notice posted and press notice published, and no public responses have been received. The application site is highlighted in red on the aerial image and is located to the west as you enter Nashmead. There are a cluster of industrial and commercial uses within this cul-de-sac, and in blue, highlighted in blue, is another site operated by the applicant, who are BP Rolls. The wider context comprises of Newport Truck Park further south and the Leeway Industrial Estate further north. The photos on the slide have been taken during a recent site visit and provide some context to the surrounding character and appearance of the streetscape and the scale of the neighbouring buildings, which, as you can see, are of a typical sort of industrial commercial appearance. To the rear of the site, which you can see in the top right-hand corner, the site is bound with a largely vacant parcel of land. This is allocated within the local development plan for employment use. So this is a photo of the unit previously. So BP Rolls, the applicant, have operated from Unit 3A and 3B for a considerable length of time, and the use of the site has been for the service, repair and MOT of commercial vehicles. In August 2023, a fire broke out and caused significant structural damage to the building. Following inspection, it was established that whilst the existing concrete pad was intact, the frame of the building was damaged beyond repair. Subsequently, a new steel-framed building was constructed on the existing footprint of the former building. The building has steel-clad walls and roof covering, with the principal elevation being the north-eastern elevation that contains several roller shutter door openings accessing the service yard. Internally, the layout is open plan and comprises of service bays. At the north-western end, the building contains an administrative office, which is a separate pedestrian access to the site. To the side, sorry, not the site. So the first photograph on the left is taken from the southern end of the building, looking across Nashmead in a northwesterly direction. And the second photo on the right-hand side shows the internal layout of the building. These photographs show the principal elevation of the building. They show the service doors that are referred to. On the right-hand side, you can see that smaller administrative office part. The design and scale of the building is comparable and suitable to the surrounding context of the commercial estate, and the materials used are considered to be appropriate and robust. The proposal is considered to comply with policy GP6, quality of design. The site layout predominantly remains as is, with the addition of 2 electric vehicle charging points to meet the requirements of Future Wales National Plan, and cycle storage at the administrative office. A designated area for the storage of refuse is also provided to the east of the building, as shown on the plan. The Council's Highways Officer has confirmed no objection to the proposal and notes that the building replaces an existing building of the same use and the same size. They have acknowledged that the introduction of charging points and cycle storage results in a betterment from the existing arrangement on site. No response has been received from environmental health. However, given the industrial context and that the building is a replacement of a previous building of the same use, there are no concerns raised regarding the impact on the local and general amenity of the area. The proposal is considered to comply with policy GP2, GP4 and W3 of the Local Development Plan. Chapter 6 of Planning Policy Wales, Edition 12, requires a green infrastructure statement that is proportionate to the development and to be submitted, demonstrated how the proposal has complied with the stepwise approach and that a net benefit for biodiversity can be achieved. The applicant has duly submitted a green infrastructure statement which outlines the existing landscape features remain unimpacted as the new building has been constructed on the footprint of the existing building. An indicative soft landscaping plan has also been provided to demonstrate enhancement can also be achieved. The photograph on the right shows an area to the north of the site where enhanced soft landscaping is proposed. Whilst confirmed as being acceptable in principle by the landscape officer, some final details and clarification are required regarding the specification and the location of the proposed planting types. It is therefore recommended that the submission of this information is controlled via plan condition, and this has been included within the officer's report within the conditional regime. Subject to that condition, the proposal complies with Planning Policy Wales Edition 12 and Planning Policy GP5 of the Local Development Plan. The site is located within Flood Zone 2 and 3C, as per the flood maps for planning, and is defended against sea flooding. The application was submitted and registered prior to the new TAN 15, which was implemented on 31st of March 2025. The proposal is for less vulnerable development in flood risk terms and reuses the existing footprint of the previous building. Natural Resources Wales are satisfied that the development proposal is acceptable. Having also had regard to the new TAN 15 document, as the proposal is redevelopment in a defended flood zone and it is not an intensification of the existing use, the proposal is considered to be acceptable. As such, it complies with TAN 15 and Policy SP5 of the Local Development Plan. So overall, it is considered that the building constructed to replace the existing unit at the site is acceptable in terms of its scale, design and appearance, and does not result in any adverse impact on local amenity, highway safety or flood risk. The proposal has demonstrated compliance with Chapter 6 of Planning Policy Wales Edition 12 and has demonstrated that ecological enhancement can be achieved. The proposal is compliant with the relevant local and national development plan, local and national planning policies, and it is recommended that the planning permission is granted with conditions as per the conditional regime set out within the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Are you open up the members? Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. As a point of clarification, if a building, as it happened there, caught fire, needed to be demolished, and they want to put something on the same footprint, another building, do they have to come back to planning?
Yeah, so it would be development that requires planning permission. It's effectively a new building. So if there was just a little bit of wear and tear or some repairs to some of the facades, perhaps replacement of some of the sheeting, that may not require, may not be classed as development, may not require planning permission. But as this was demolished to the ground and rebuilt as a brand new building, albeit on the same footprint and structure, it is classed as development that requires planning permission. And in this case, because the floor area is greater than 1,000 square metres, it actually constitutes major development, which is why it automatically comes to planning committee for presentation and approval or refusal as may be.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just for clarification on that then. So if the building was burnt down and they've built another one without coming to planning permission now, are they?
In short, yes. So yeah, the building was there. It's been in use by BP Rolls, who the applicant, for a significant amount of time. August 2023, there was a fire. Following a structural survey, it was deemed that the building itself, due to the issues caused by the fire, was not safe sort of be fixed, I suppose. Hence why it's been demolished and rebuilt. The existing concrete pad on site in situ was deemed fine, so he sort of built off that on the existing footprint. But they've rebuilt this, and then I'm not sure the exact reason why they've applied retrospectively. Perhaps they didn't realise they needed permission, and they thought it was a replacement, maybe. And I'm not sure the context as to why we've, how it's come to us as an application, but it has come to us as an application, and obviously we've assessed it against the relevant local and national planning policies, and in this instance we deem that it is acceptable.
That was my next question. Actually, how come they can build another one then without coming to plan permission regarding this?
Yeah, so it is, as is built on site right now, is what they're applying for. There are a few minor elements, such as the electric vehicle charging points, which will need to be installed, the designated refuge area, and the soft landscaping, and the implementation of control of those to be implemented within an agreed timescale is set out within the conditional regime.
So why didn't the local authority and the planning department intervene beforehand then, before they were building it? If it should have gone to planning beforehand before they rebuild it. So I can go out tomorrow and build a house tomorrow, and out around the corner from me, without you knowing it, and nothing be said about it. Why didn't the council sort of intervene first?
Well, I suppose unless we know about something, unless sort of it's reported as a breach of planning control, we wouldn't necessarily know about something. I'm not, in this instance, I'm not actually sure whether this was reported through enforcement or whether it maybe came through by a building regulations checks, which sometimes we pick up on things that are unauthorised, or whether I don't know why it's come retrospectively, but it has. It's obviously a risk to the applicant. They undertake the works, they undertake it. If for whatever reason we deem it's not acceptable and it's refused planning permission, then there's potential enforcement implications of that, and obviously that comes at their own risk to do it that way. They have done it that way. In this instance, we've considered that it is acceptable, but obviously that might not always be the case for different sites and different developments moving forward if they are retrospective.
Thank you. Don't see any more hands raised, so if we now move to the vote on the officer's recommendations to be granted with conditions attached. Okay. Councillor Howells, seconder. Councillor Jordan. Okay. Councillor, this is now carried. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Yeah. All those in favour? Okay. And myself, unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item 3, page 40 to 50. The application number is 25/0306. It's for 33 Walmer Road, Newport, MP19 8NU. It's in the Beechwood ward, and the ward members are Councillor Davis, Spencer and Pym. The proposal is to retrospective application for the change of use of a property from a residential dwelling to a 3-number bedroom HMO. The main considerations are the flood risk, the character, residential amenity, parking, social cohesion and fear of crime. The officer's recommendation will be to grant with conditions. The planning officer again is
me, Vicky.
Oh, Vicky.
Yeah,
swapped.
me this time.
Okay, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair.
We've got 2 speakers, is that correct?
No.
2 speakers?
No public speaking on this one.
Oh, sorry, they've sat in the chair. No. Right, okay, that's right. Okay.
Thank you. This application is for the change of use of a 3-bedroom residential property to a 3-bedroom house in multiple occupation. A HMO is a house occupied by people who are usually unrelated and have private bedrooms but shared facilities such as kitchens, living areas and bathrooms. Planning permission was recently refused for the change of use of the property from a dwelling to a 4-bedroom house in multiple occupation. There was one reason for refusal, which related to flood risk. The application has been resubmitted with the number of bedrooms reduced from 4 to 3. With no ground floor bedrooms. The property is already in use as a HMO and the application is retrospective. The property is a mid-terrace dwelling fronting Walmer Road, accessed via Chepstow Road to the north, and Conway Road to the south. It's situated in an urban residential area,
Chair,
which is...
Can I interrupt the officers? We're only getting a certain amount of the slides on the screen. Not getting all of them.
Ah, sorry. Sorry. That better? Yeah. The property is a mid-terrace dwelling fronting Walmer Road, accessed via Chepstow Road to the north and Conway Road to the south. It's situated in an urban residential area which is characterised by rows of terrace dwelling. The property is located 150 metres to the nearest bus stop on Chepstow Road, which takes you into the city centre. There is a local convenience store approximately 100 metres away on the corner of Walmer Road and Chepstow Road, and Beechwood District Centre is located just over 200 metres away from the site on Chepstow Road, offering a range of goods and services. The property scores very highly in sustainability terms, being within such close proximity to frequent bus services and close walking distances to local shops and services. The layout provides a hallway and communal living area and kitchen dining room at ground floor with 3 bedrooms at first floor. The property has an enclosed rear garden and small front forecourt. Bin storage will be within the front forecourt as per the arrangement as a house in single occupancy. The property is currently a house and will remain a house. In this case, 3 tenants are proposed. As a 3-bedroom dwelling, we can typically expect 3 or 4 occupants, albeit these will normally be related. In a HMO, like a dwelling, the occupants are expected to live as a household, sharing facilities in the property. However, typically they will occupy with tenancy agreements or contracts per room or occupant. The personal details of occupants themselves is not a planning matter, neither is the reputation, background, business, etc. of the landlord or owner. The local planning authority will and can only concern itself with land use planning considerations in the public interest, and consequently concerns for identity of future HMO occupiers, the details of rental agreements and charges, the history and personal details of the landlord and other similar matters will not ordinarily inform a planning application assessment and are not considered relevant to this case. Some of these matters are regulated by other parties. The main considerations of this application are the potential impacts on the change of use, on parking provision and highway safety, as well as the impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area and neighbouring properties and flood risk. Impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area and neighbouring properties can include matters of social cohesion and fear of crime, albeit the weight that can be afforded to these considerations is dependent upon the fear of crime being objectively justified, the fear of crime having some reasonable basis, and the fear of crime relating to the proposed land use. In planning terms, rather than assumptions not supported by evidence as to the character of the future occupiers, we know this from case law. The proposal is within the urban area. Has a lawful residential use and is located off of Chepstow Road, which is a main thoroughfare through Newport with easy access to local services in a nearby district centre. These factors accord with the principles set out in Strategic Policy SP1 of the adopted LDP. Policy H8 of the adopted LDP relates to self-contained accommodation and houses in multiple occupation, and says that HIMOs will only be permitted if specified criteria are met. The full policy wording is set out in paragraph 7.5 of the assessment. The adopted HMO SPG, which must also be afforded substantial weight in decision-making, states that clusters of HMOs can alter the composition of a community and detract from the local visual amenity. The guidance introduces a threshold above which HMOs are considered to detract from the character of the area. In general, the Council will not support a planning application that would take the number of HMOs considered as a proportion of the local housing stock above a specified limit. This site is located within the 10% threshold area. When taking a 50-metre radius from the address point of the application site, the front elevations of 32 properties are caught. There are no existing registered HMOs within the 50-metre radius. Therefore, if the application were to proceed, the 10% threshold would not be exceeded. Consequently, HMO concentration levels are not grounds to refuse permission in this case. In terms of amenity considerations for future occupiers of the HMO units, there is a communal living room and dining room with kitchen located at ground floor. Access to a rear garden is provided to residents, and bike storage provision can be controlled by condition. No external alterations are proposed, and no changes that may require this property to stand out or appear different to the other residences in the street. Refuse receptacles are stored behind the front boundary walls within the forecourt area, and this will continue to be the case with the HMO having comparable receptacles to a single dwelling. The HMO standards state that a single bedroom should be at least 6.51 metres squared. Shared kitchens and living rooms for up to 5 persons should be 7 metres squared and 10 metres squared respectively. One of the bedrooms would fall below this requirement at approximately 5.28 metres squared. However, the fact that all rooms contain windows providing adequate light and ventilation for occupiers with access to a good-sized rear garden weighs in its favour, and communal spaces are generously proportioned within the property, with the communal living areas comprising living and dining rooms exceeding licensing standards. Accommodation would provide an adequate standard of amenity for future occupiers. In relation to parking and highways matters, the existing dwelling has 3 bedrooms, and this generates a parking demand of 3 spaces, calculated using the Council's own SPG. There is no parking on site. The 3-bedroom HMO would require 1 space per bedroom, a total of 3 in that instance as well. And so there is no increase in parking demand as a result of this proposal, in accordance with the Council's own guidance. Existing parking problems and concerns regarding a worsening of the existing situation and subsequent highway safety matters have been raised as significant concerns within the resident objections and also the local councillor response. Parking was observed by officers at the time of a recent site visit, and whilst it is clearly in high demand due to the absence of off-street parking provisions serving houses in the area, there were on-street parking spaces within walking distance of the site. It is appreciated that parking demand will vary depending on the day and time, and reliance on on-street parking may mean that occupiers are unable to park in front or even near to their homes. However, inspectors have confirmed this is not justification to refuse planning permission, and the availability of on-street parking on neighbouring streets is sufficient. The local planning authority has tested appeal decisions on HMOs in relation to lack of parking several times in recent years. All have been dismissed at appeal. In this case, we know that the site is sustainable and the proposals accord with the Council's adopted parking standard, and there is no highway safety objections on parking grounds. Demand for parking arising from HMO uses, particularly where these form a low proportion of the housing stock in the 50-metre catchment area, is not considered to be a robust reason for refusing planning permission, even though the potential for on-road parking demand is acknowledged. In terms of flood risk consideration, the planning application proposes highly vulnerable development as a change of use from existing highly vulnerable development into a 3-bed HMO. Following the reduction in bedroom numbers, there would be no intensification of the use and notably no ground floor bedroom. NRW note that all bedrooms would be at first floor and therefore offer no objection. The proposals comply with the aims of TAM 15 and policy SP3 of the Council's development plan. The previous reason for refusal falls away with the removal of the ground floor bedroom. As noted above, the property has the benefit of a small front forecourt set behind a wall, whereby refuse can be stored without spilling onto the footway. This is the way in which waste would be stored as a dwelling, and the use as a HMO would not stand out in this respect. Given the size of the HMO having 3 bedrooms, the waste receptacles are no different to the use as a 3-bedroom house. The change of use would not result in the exceedance of the threshold set out in the Council's guidance, and it's not considered that the proposals would result in a demonstrable impact to the character of the area. The proposals would not result in an increase for parking demand when assessed against the Council's adopted parking SPG. Furthermore, the site is located within a sustainable location within close proximity to shops and services with good transport links. As such, it's not considered that the proposals would result in an adverse impact to highway safety or neighbouring amenity. The proposals are acceptable having regard to flood risk matters, and previous reasons for refusal relating flood risk is overcome by the removal of the ground floor bedroom. It's therefore recommended to members that the application is granted subject to the following conditions as set out in the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Open up to the floor, please. Oh, Councillor Hills? No? Okay, councillors? Just a second. No, you were supposed to give 24 hours notice to speak. There's nothing on the papers or the officers have had any notice of any speakers towards this.
Okay, I will apologise for that, and I should know better having been sat up there. However, as it was called in by Councillor Davis, and we was invited, I thought we would be invited to speak.
That isn't the case. Well, it might be the case that you're there, but you interpreted that you got the right to speak.
Chair,
we could be open to challenge if we did allow it. Sorry, yes?
Sorry, Chair. I did report to Taylor. I had to change my plans around, and I wasn't sure if I was able to make this today. For future, I'll confirm I want to speak, whether I can get to the meeting or not, but it was only this morning that I was able to attend the meeting, and I've changed my plans to get here.
Okay. No, I'll just have to leave it at this point and move on back on to the members.
Can I just confirm that with Taylor that I did report that I wasn't able to confirm whether...
yeah, you reported that you might attend, but for planning we need direct confirmation that you will request to speak. You can request to speak preemptively, and then if you couldn't attend, then they could change it.
Okay, I'll bear that in mind. That's,
so I'm sorry about that. Apologies accepted. Okay, sorry. Move on. Councillor Jordan.
Sorry, I do have to question this. I have been in this position where you are sat, and I have been told before it's up to the chairs, if I'm right.
Yeah, well, you are right, it is at the chair's discretion. There is a code of practice that sets out clearly that ward members who want to speak need to give 24 hours notice minimum. So that's in the code of practice. It is at the chair's discretion. Any change does potentially represent a risk of challenge to the authority in terms of not following due process, because anything you could say could influence members and result in a different decision if you don't speak. obviously, it's our chair's first planning committee this month as well. So it is as his discretion. We would advise that he doesn't, but it is his decision. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, councillors. Sorry, Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just go back to the report. Can you show me a picture then, please, what the new layout's going to be then on the property itself of the? Because all you've got is the existing one there, but not as shown as the new one of the bedrooms upstairs, and there is the plans of.
Oh, apologies. Yeah, I thought I had put one into there, but I can open it up from our system otherwise now. Yeah, the first floor is exactly the same. It might take me a little while to bring it up from our system, so I'll have a look for that. But just to explain in the meantime, the first floor is exactly the same. The only difference to the layout is the removal of that bedroom 1 on ground floor, right, and so that's now a communal living area. So no bedrooms on ground floor. So what's the communal
what's the back then? That's going to be the dining area, then, is it something at all?
Yeah, it's as per that layout, bar the bedroom on the ground floor. So a communal living room, and I can show you a photo of that because I've actually visited inside. Communal living room, kitchen. That bedroom will be a further communal living area. So.
Also, as well, when you said there was the parking issue and everything else, how come a parking survey hasn't been done? It's not even shown in the report of the parking survey.
We've not requested they undertake a parking survey because it's not justified in accordance with our own SPG, because there's no increase in parking demand. The existing use as a 3-bedroom dwelling creates a demand of 3 spaces, so does the HMO, so there's no grounds for us to request that they undertake a parking survey.
Yeah, I can understand that, but the amount of parking, the houses in there as well, I think it really should have needed a parking survey done so members can actually know what the situation is regarding parking area as well. Also as well, I know it's on the conditions as well. You said you've got a bike storage. Where's the bike storage going to go? Because I wouldn't be happy if it's a HMO walking a dirty bike through the property to the back of the building. There's no access to the back of the building. Runs onto another adjacent gardens, both sides, all the way around.
That's correct. There is no rear access to the property other than going through the property itself, and we've acknowledged that in the report, but that is often the case with these types of terrace properties, and it would be the same way in which a bike would be stored in the rear garden in occupation as a single dwelling. They'd have to take it through the hallway and then out to the back garden. So we do acknowledge that. The bike store will go in the back garden, which there's ample space for, but yeah, there's no getting around the fact that they'll have to take bikes through the house itself.
Sorry, Councillor Howells.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to firstly express my disappointment in your decision not to allow the ward councillors to speak. It's really important for planning committee members to hear the views of ward councillors who obviously represent their community, and I'm sure are, have been contacted significantly about this application, and it's really, good to see 2 ward councillors turning up to the meeting. I can't find anything in the planning code of practice that says that members have to give 24 hours notice. I've just read through it.
3.6, Councillor.
We're into 3.6, Andrew.
So ward members representing the ward in which the proposed development is located are allowed to speak at planning committee at the chair's discretion. Ward members should
Have you got a newer version than me then? What version have you got? I've got the ones on the website.
What's the date on the one on the website?
May 2014.
No, there's an updated one that was approved at planning committee since I've been here. So the one I've got is dated November 2022,
okay,
but it's definitely been adopted since I've arrived.
If that's approved at planning committee, that would need to go to full council because that's an amendment to the council's standing orders, no?
It's a code of practice, so
okay.
it's not.
Doesn't fall. So it's a code of practice, so it's only a guidance document. And I just think the Chair's decision is wrong on this, given that the Council's website, which I can show you a link to now, doesn't contain the up-to-date guidance. I think it's really poor that you're not letting these guys have their decision, their opportunity to speak today. It's really important for members to hear from all councillors. And, you know, I think the decision is misguided in my view. So that's my first point. I'd ask you to reconsider, Chair, but that's down to you, obviously.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I do take on your disappointment. Myself, I'm disappointed as well. It was, I'm just trying to follow guidance at the minute from my first meeting, and it's well aware of that, the councillors. Thank you.
Okay. On a sort of more pertinent point, the bedroom sizes on these bedrooms, the bedroom 3 is 2.2 metres by 2.4 metres. Sorry, 2.2 metres by 2.4 metres. Very, very small, and in my view, doesn't meet the sizes required to license a HMO. So I'm not sure why the licensing team have granted a licence on that basis, but in terms of our decision making, I cannot support this application with a bedroom size of less than 6 square metres, which is the normal requirement for licensing HMO.
It is licensing requirements, not our requirements. We don't have minimum bedroom sizes for HMOs, but policy H8 does specify that a suitable standard of amenity must be provided. I mean, what I would say in terms of this layout, it is a small bedroom, but it would have been a bedroom formerly as a house in single occupancy. With the removal of the ground floor bedroom, there's very generous communal areas with this HMO, more than you would generally see. You've got 2 large living areas and a kitchen and a good-sized rear gardens. All of the bedrooms have got natural light with an outlook. So although it does fall slightly below the size requirements of licensing, we consider that there would still be a very good standard of amenity.
Thank you. I mean, I don't agree. I don't think it's a good standard of amenity. There's only 1 bathroom in this property as well. That's where somebody's expected to live, and the other areas are only communal. The second point, given that the original application was for a 4-bedroom HMO, and now there's only going to be permission sought for a 3-bedroom HMO, is somebody being made homeless as a result? Because, as I understand from the comments in the report, there's somebody living currently in that communal room downstairs. No, there's no one living in the communal downstairs. I visited the property within the last fortnight to 3 weeks, and there was only 2 of the rooms, 2 of the first floor rooms were in occupancy at that time, and there were no bedrooms on the ground floor at that time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Could I ask, the licensing approached on any comments on the size of these rooms? I know in the building regulations and the like, they've got to be a specific size. Because you've got a double bed there, but you've got to have room for a bedside table and a wardrobe, somewhere to put their clothes. And obviously you're going to live there, so is there any other storage area where they can put that?
So as I say, they've got generous communal living areas downstairs, but no, you wouldn't really expect them to use that for their own personal storage. It is a small bedroom, but formerly used as a bedroom, albeit a box bedroom, as a house in single occupancy. So we've consulted Environmental Health as part of the application, and a couple of branches of Environmental Health, including licensing. And they've confirmed that it's licensed as a 4-bedroom HMO, and that they have no objections. So, I mean, they're aware of their own standards, but haven't objected.
Thank you. Yeah, I did take on your comments about the size of it, and yeah, I agree. Sorry, Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. I got 3 questions. One is on item 5.3. It got HMO licensing, confirmed location of existing HMOs within the area. Is that correct?
Yeah, so as part of every HMO application assessment that we undertake, we will always check with our licensing colleagues what their records show compared with what ours records show. And the diagram here is the 50-metre radius, and as you can see, so a HMO would be indicated by a green square on the property, and there are none in this instance within 50 metres.
None within the 50 metres?
None within the 50 metres.
Thank you. The other thing was, in regards to what Councillor Jordan mentioned, was the fact about the one bedroom smaller than what our ideal recommendations are. What concerns me, and I'm of the same opinion that I would vote against the application being approved because it will set a precedent on other properties within the area. If we let this go in regards to one being less than 6 metres, I can't see other properties within the area doing exactly the same, because they can have up to 10%, I believe you say, within the 50 metres can be HMOs.
So just in terms of precedent, I think every application must be assessed on its own merits, so there is no such thing as precedent in planning terms. What I would say this particular HMO has going for it, that others may not, is the generous communal living areas. So it is, like I say, it's quite unusual to see such large communal living areas on the ground floor. That's been done because of the flood risk. So the refused application contained a ground floor bedroom, but they had to take that out because of flood risk. And as a result of that, we've got some very, very generous communal areas. So and just to reiterate that the 6.51 metres squared, I think it is not a planning specification. We don't have minimum room sizes for HMO in planning. It's a licensing consideration. And despite that, it is licensed by Environmental Health.
The other question is, Chair, in regards to the waste management, we would anticipate the property receiving a single 120-litre bin. Now, is that one of the green bins, or are they the big rectangular bins?
So it's a 120-litre wheelie bin. That is what you can see in that photo there. So that's what it's entitled to as a single occupancy house, and that's what it will be entitled to as a HMO.
Okay. So we've got 3 bedrooms using that one bid. I don't think that's sufficient enough, but that's my own opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Rheoli.
I'm seriously concerned about this application. There's lots of alarm bells ringing. I know that we have to judge it on certain standards and criteria. I fail to understand why licensing cannot even adhere to their own standards. We set standards because we want decent standards for the residents of Newport. The moment that we start to compromise standards on the size of bedrooms, you might as well just forget everything and let anybody go where they wish to go. I just flabbergasted that there's nothing joined up here. Planning, you don't really have to take into consideration regarding the size of the bedroom. Licensing, Well, they're not objecting. They know it's smaller and it's their criteria. There's nobody. Maybe people don't care anymore. Let's just throw it in. You mentioned the aquatic, wonderful living space. Well, if it floods, they're just going to all be in a dinghy there, underwater, enjoying some kind of natural, I don't know, hydro pool. The very fact of having to wheel your bike through the house is totally and utterly unacceptable. When you start putting together the whole thing, we at the planning committee need to make a stance. We as an authority in Newport need to make a stance. This accommodation is unacceptable, not fit for purpose. It doesn't meet the licensing standards criteria. The fact that they don't care doesn't take away from the fact that I care. And I care. And it seems like a lot of people in the committee care. Also, when this meeting, when this part is concluded, I want us to stay on to look at why these members were not allowed to speak. I understand the guidance you were given. I understand the rest of it. But really, I just think for openness and transparency, we just need to be a bit more flexible in our approach. Sometimes people cannot give you 24 hours notice that they're coming to speak. But as far as I'm concerned, it falls below the standard. It's inappropriate. It's got no parking. This idea of kicking the can down the road and causing further congestion elsewhere is not acceptable. They are not a family. They're complete and utter strangers. You cannot expect them to be able to get on. It's just a recipe for absolute disaster. And I certainly are struggling to support this. And I have to make a stance. And this is probably the stance I'm going to be making, which comes today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay. Yeah. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually had my hand up since the original discussion about whether the members could speak. And on the list that I can see, I was first to speak online, and then Councillor Harvey, and then Councillor Rheoli. So can I just request that a little bit more of an eye is kept on the online people wishing to speak? Before I mention the planning application, everyone else seems to have said a little bit about the decision not to let the visiting council members speak. I'm just wondering, is there, because I'm disappointed as well, I understand the argument that there's a procedure to follow, but it's not as if these are unexpected people that have just walked into the meeting unexpectedly and unknown about and expected to speak. It's a slight oversight in procedure, no more than that. Is there a facility where maybe we as a committee could even take a vote, and if the committee accepts that a mistake has been made but allows it to speak, do we have that facility? That's the question I wanted to ask about 20 minutes ago. As far as the planning is concerned, there's a lot of things being said which we all find frustrating. I've raised things myself in the past that we find frustrating, but at the end of the day, we are a planning committee and we have to restrict ourselves to planning considerations. I had concerns about parking, but I also fully understand that it's a 3-bedroom house. If a family lived in a 3-bedroom house, they're allocated 3 spaces. So is the HMO. There's no difference. There's nothing we can do about that. So yeah, I understand the frustrations. I understand the concerns. But in terms of planning, it is what it is. My biggest concern, to be honest, is the fact that it was refused permission as a 4-bedroom HMO to begin with. They seem to have gone ahead and, unless I've misunderstood something, but they seem to have gone ahead and just used it as a 3-bedroom HMO anyway without planning permission, and then come to this committee for retrospective planning permission, which to me just seems to be taking advantage of the system. So I wonder, is there a question to be asked there? You know, are there some answers that need to be requested regarding that? But I would like some guidance from legal, please, about can we take a vote to allow the councillors to speak? Because it is important that they represent their constituents, the people who voted them in. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, just in terms of members taking the vote, members voted for this code of practice. This committee voted for this code of practice. There might have been a slight difference in makeup. Not all members might have been here on that day of that vote, but that was approved. Now, there's no facility for members to make a call on whether a ward member speaks. That is at the chair's discretion. This is a difficult one, obviously. It's our new chair's first planning committee. You know, it's not like it's experienced and we've had loads of time. It's also complicated with our old chair making the request. So the chair's made his decision and he's outlined the reasons why. We've advised him as such. So legal officers, myself, is to reduce the risk on the council. So that is why at this planning committee, and there are options available to you, but it's been determined that the ward member cannot speak.
I understand that, Andrew. Thanks for the clarification. I totally understand the reasons. I'm not disputing that. And obviously, I know it's the councillor's first meeting as chair as well. I'm definitely not trying to put pressure on him. I'm just trying to draw a distinction between somebody trying to abuse the system and just a genuine oversight, which this obviously is. And I really do think, even if this went to appeal, anybody with an ounce of common sense would be able to see that, you know, an allowance has been made for a minor oversight rather than somebody trying to abuse the system. But I've had my say, so I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harvey.
Sorry, Chair, can I have my questions answered, please, regarding the...
Yes, sure. The retrospective nature of the application, yeah. So it is retrospective, and it was in use as a HMO even prior to the last application that was refused. That is sometimes the way that applications are submitted. It's it would always be against our recommendation that someone go ahead with development or a change of use without planning permission. And I think probably the likelihood with this one is that it was picked up because licensing, when they issue a licence, they will do checks with us to check that something has planning permission. And that's probably how we've been made aware of this particular HMO operating without planning consent. But that is the nature of an enforcement. It is reactive, and unless we know about a breach, then we can't take any action.
Can I just ask a question? Is somebody actually living in that room now? Obviously, it's a 3-bed, so somebody is actually living there.
Yeah, so as I said, I visited the property within the last 2 to 3 weeks, and at that time there were 2 bedrooms in occupation. At that time, 2 first-floor bedrooms in occupation.
Not the single?
No.
Sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everything everybody has said, but it's just a few points I want to make. I think we're losing the point. It's a HMO. It's not a 3-bedroom house with the same occupants from the same family. It's a HMO. So you've got 3 different families living there. So you're saying about parking, you're saying, oh, they're entitled. If it's a house, they can have 3 parking spaces. That's fine. But a HMO, those rooms could be doubled up on. So those parking spaces go from 3 to 6. So there is a parking issue. And the same with the bin storage, as Trevor said. That bin ain't adequate for 3 families. It's not a house, it's a HMO. So it's 3 separate families there. So that one little bin will not be sufficient for 3 families. And my concern is, the same as everyone else, is having that bedroom. That bedroom is a standard, and there's a standard we should stick to. And if it's undersized, then it shouldn't be going ahead. And as Councillor Reynolds just said, this will come in retrospective. We should be stepping down on these people
who think they can go and do what they want and then apply for planning permission afterwards. It's just my thoughts on things. And I do agree with, I think the councillor should have been able to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to come back in response to your points about the rooms being doubled up on, one of the conditions recommended is that there are no more than 3 occupants. So if they were to do that, they would be in breach and we could potentially take enforcement action.
Councillor Jordan.
No.
Are you who wanted to speak, Jordan? Or who?
I put my hand up before.
Oh, I thought you both had your hands.
It was me, then Councillor Jordan, then Councillor Cox.
Right, okay.
I just wanted to go back to a point which Vicky answered earlier in relation to room sizes. Vicky's comments were that it's not a planning consideration. But the HMO guidance says, paragraph 5.45, and I hope I got the right version this time, Andrew, the Council's Environmental Health Housing Licensing Department provides guidance on room sizes for HMOs. In order to avoid complications, i.e. refusal of the application, applicants ought to familiarise themselves with these standards before applying for planning permission. So to me, it's a legitimate ground to refuse planning on room sizes that don't comply with licensing requirements.
Sorry, just to come back on that, I don't think I said it's not a consideration. I didn't mean to, and if I did, then apologies. What I think I said is that they're not our standards. So room sizes are a consideration for us because it must provide a suitable level of amenity, but we don't have specific room sizes like licensing do.
Okay, is there any oh, no.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I do appreciate your job for your time in the Chair, and I do appreciate it under the pressures you're under, but I would want to make a recommendation, if Planning Committee will agree with me, is to defer this till next month so the councillors and sub-ward members can actually speak at the meeting so they can get their points across as well, if possible.
Okay. Take that on board a minute. Is there any other anybody else want to speak on this? And then we'll come back to your recommendation. No? Right. Councillor Perkins.
So while on there, there's all the bits about the parking. It was a 3-bedroom house and it would require 3 parking spaces. That 1 bedroom was a bedroom, as you've stated, but it was a bedroom for a family member, and that family member could store stuff in that living space. But a stranger doesn't have that ability to store their stuff where other people have access to. That bedroom is too small, and I think we should refuse it on that.
Okay, that's everybody.
Chair.
Sorry?
Chair. I got my hand up.
Your hand's up, yeah. So we'll...
Yeah. Can I speak, Chair?
Oh, sorry, I didn't notice that then. Go on, Councillor.
No, that's okay, Chair. I know, listen, I know it's difficult to gauge these things, and I thank you for the good work you're all doing there. You know, trying to enforce after something has happened. So if this was granted and you put a condition, only 3 people can live individually in each room, so 1 person to one room, and if they breach that, we will enforce that. I'm not quite sure how you're going to enforce it. What are you going to do? You're going to evict the other person? So the young man or young girl goes out and they fall in love and they go into the house, and let's say they all fall in love. So now we have 6 people. What are you going to do? Because they have human rights then. Oh, hang on. You're not going to be able to control it. You're not going to be able to control it. You're not going to be able to evict them. You're not going to be able to stop them from going in there. You're not going to be able to do any of that whatsoever. It might sound nice. It might sound great, as if we've got some magic powers. Once the horse has bolted, you ain't going to close the stable door after. And this is where these policies, or lack of them, are going wrong. I think it's about time we made a stance. It doesn't fall within the licensing standards. We are not going to be able to realistically control the amount of people that turn up in these bedrooms for whatever reason. And the whole rest of it, as I say, kick the can down the road regarding car parking and making that worse for everyone else. This is unacceptable to me. I don't think it should be postponed. I think the vote should be taken today. Let's not postpone something. I guess the ward members, if they were speaking, wouldn't be in favour of this. I guess they wouldn't. So I move that the vote be taken.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just going to come back in on one of the points you've raised there about enforcement. The authority can take enforcement action. You'll be aware that they're already operating as a HMO. So effectively, if what you're saying is true, we can't take any action at this point, but that is patently incorrect. We can. So just to clarify that, we could seek to enforce conditions. We can serve, there are a suite of enforcement tools that we can use, notwithstanding human rights. It's still about serving a proper planning purpose. So this is something we have considered, we do consider, and we will utilise if required. Thank you.
However, what would be, so we got a family living in that one bed, so we got a husband and wife or a partner living in one of the rooms now. How successful are you going to be with getting one of them out and splitting up a bona fide relationship? How are you going to do it?
Councillor,
explain to me how it could be done.
There are enforcement powers. We can serve notices, breach of condition notices, enforcement notices. Otherwise, they could be doing that now. You're effectively saying we couldn't take any action at this juncture because they could be doing that now. And that's incorrect.
Okay, but what meaningful action would you be able to take? I know that we could threaten, I know that we could speak about it. Outline to me then, Andrew, what action could be taken and where you would take it to.
So we could serve an enforcement notice. There are different notices under enforcement legislation that we could serve. Breach of condition, enforcement notices, stop notices. We would pick the appropriate notice that gave us the most power to effectively remedy the breach of planning control. So we serve that. Anyone has a right of appeal against it, and that right of appeal will be heard by the Planning and Environment Decisions Wales.
And if they continue to ignore these enforcements, what's going to happen?
So if the enforcement notice is upheld, we could seek to prosecute non-compliance. There are other avenues we could seek. So not just under planning legislation, it's been done elsewhere, and we can utilise the same powers. So I'm satisfied that if the conditions, any conditions on any planning consent are being breached, we have enforcement powers to be able to determine that if it's in the public interest.
And what if it isn't in the public interest to split up a husband and wife? You see where we're going?
No, I don't.
I don't progress, please. This is a pointless discussion with the planning committee. We don't need to be talking about all the ifs and buts about enforcement.
Well, I think we do.
Thank you all. Going back, before any other speakers, I'd like to announce, I just had a look through and as the feelings are high during, from other councillors on my remarks to refuse the ward members to speak, which I honestly, ward members have got a right to speak and they should do as they're representing their ward members. And also that the councillor did make contact with the officer, and he said that he may not be there. The feelings are that he was going to turn up, but he may not be here. So that was my mistake. So on this occasion, I'm not setting a precedent for in the future, and I remind all councillors and other parties, if they wish to speak, please stick to the code of conduct, 24 hours notice. Let the officers know in advance, and especially the chair will know, because I won't be put in this position again. So on this occasion, could the ward member like to give his comments?
Okay. Councillor Pym is the councillor who is going to speak. Well, he's back now, and I'll let him speak, and if I want to back up, then I'll back up.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you very much.
Councillor Pym?
Okay.
5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for granting me the opportunity to speak. It's Councillor Matthew Pym of the Beechwood Ward. So the concerns for me with this application is the street and the area of Eveswell, where this property is based, is a very built-up area. It's a terraced house. It would be traditionally a small family or an elderly couple that live in this type of property, as seen by a number of neighbours who have lived in the area for generations. Whilst there's not a HMO application or existing HMO within 50 metres of this property, not that much further away, there are already a number of HMOs that are in existence, and from the standard and the issues and complaints that we've received about these existing HMOs, this is a big concern for us. It's a smaller property. It's not suitable for 3 occupants. It's not big enough. We'll have continuous issues with waste, and that would be the fear, congestion with parking, and also it doesn't fit in with the community cohesion and spirit that already exists in an area where there are established families who are very concerned about the HMOs already in the area and the problems that they've created over the past decade. At the top of Walmer Road is a mini-market that is very busy and popular throughout the day, and next door to that mini-market is a Methodist church. The business district that was highlighted is a very popular and busy area, and when people visit, they usually take up the parking spaces in these roads that are off Chepstow Road. So I'm not sure what time the team visited this area to take a view on the traffic, but at any given day, there is a lot of congestion that causes road safety issues at the top of the junction. There is a potential that the occupants over time could acquire cars and vehicles, they could be motorbikes, and they're going to add to the congestion that already exists and, if anything, increase the issues with road safety in and around this area of our ward. So we are opposed to the application. We don't feel that the property is big enough for a HMO, and we discourage it because we don't want it to set a precedence, and more HMO applications are made in our ward in similar properties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, for letting us speak, or letting Councillor Pym speak. I just wanted to touch on one. Firstly, I didn't come here to cause trouble today, honestly. No, honestly, God. No, I will echo what Councillor Pym has said. The house is not suitable for an HMO. A box bedroom, that's what it is, a box bedroom. I struggled to let one of my children have a box bedroom when he was growing up. You know, it's not for an adult, a box bedroom. And parking, it's great to have a photograph with some parking spaces in the daytime. You go over there after 4 o'clock, they're parking on pavements, on corners, everywhere. It's not suitable, this residential area, for an HMO. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Comments will be taken on board, I sure. Okay. Councillor Harvey again, is that correct? You got a hand up?
Yeah, I did have my hand up beforehand, Chair. It's just on a point, the legal point. It's a breach of planning control. Well, if this HMO had gone ahead without planning, what planning controls have that breached? You're saying there's a HMO there and he's opened up without planning permission? So why haven't it been enforced?
So this application seeks to regularise the use, Councillor. So there's nothing in planning legislation that prevents someone submitting a retrospective application in the first instance. We wouldn't seek to take enforcement action if someone is seeking to regularise it through an application, which they've sought to do. And as you'll see, as officers, we consider the proposal to be acceptable. Going through the concerns noted. In terms of parking, the parking requirement for a 3-bed house and a 3-bed HMO is the same. So we've already previously lost appeal cases on situations that are worse than this, undoubtedly worse than this. So that is a ground that I cannot see as arguable at all. In terms of waste, we've got a waste manager who says there's no objection to the proposal. So I can't see that being a reason for refusal at all. Bike parking is at the rear. That's not uncommon with terraced houses that don't have rear access. As I said, we've had appeal decisions on that. I cannot see that being an arguable reason for refusal. Members will be aware that we have refused this application previously on one ground alone, that being there was a bedroom at ground floor level in a flood area. That issue has been overcome. So this is why, as officers, we're supportive of this proposal. It's a 3-person HMO. They've got sufficient amenity space, communal space downstairs, in officers' opinion. And we didn't refuse previously on the basis of the shortfall in terms of the size of that 3rd bedroom. That is officers' opinion. Now, it is worth pointing out, just to make you aware, the standards referred to are licensing standards. They're not planning policy. Colleagues in licensing have granted a licence on this property. That goes against us. If members are minded to refuse this application on the basis of the impact of that 1 bedroom, as I said, they can do that. That will go against us and could be seen, in my view, as unreasonable behaviour, leading to an award of costs. Now, members can make that decision, perfectly entitled to do so, but it's useful for me to just set that out at this juncture if members are minded not to move second, vote on the officer's recommendation and propose something else. Thank you.
Okay. Nobody else hand up? Oh, Councillor Perkins.
So it's licensed as a 3-bedroom HMO. How do we... sorry, licensed as a 4-bedroom HMO. So we then grant permission, if we are so minded, for a 3-bedroom. Where does the licensing and the planning then come together? And could they then use the downstairs room as the bedroom opposed to the small single room that nobody would have room to put all their stuff in?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so in answer that, could they use the grant? If we grant planning permission, I think the condition which restricts... Yeah, so condition 3, which is recommended, states that it shall have a maximum of 3 bedrooms and 3 occupants with no bedrooms at ground floor. So if we grant planning permission and they use the downstairs room as a bedroom, they'll be in breach of that condition. They have a licence to run it as a 4-bed HMO, but they need both. So they need planning permission and they need a licence from Environmental Health. They've got the licence, but we are recommending that they only get planning permission on the basis of a 3-bed HMO. And if we grant consent for this, it will be on the basis of a 3-bed HMO, not 4.
Sorry, Councillor Howells.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make a final comment on the points which Andrew made. You know, I take on board the points around us potentially putting the local authority at risk of unreasonable behaviour because the licensing team have acted not in accordance with their policy. You know, and Andrew will be aware that I've raised a separate case about the differentials between planning and licensing and them not acting congruently together. So, you know, I hope to be able to resolve that issue at the next council meeting, but until then we're in the position that we're in. And the sort of officer's decision around amenity is that there's sufficient amenity even though that bedroom is really small, because there's lots of living space downstairs. But when the original application came in, there wasn't lots of living space downstairs because it was proposed to be a 4-bedroom HMO. So in my view, planning officers have failed in their original decision on amenity and not also added a reason of refusal around the poor amenity, because in that original consideration, those 2 rooms weren't there. That was proposed to be a bedroom, and officers refused on the basis of the flood risk alone and have missed that. So if we're putting the authority at risk on costs now, I think that's because failures have been made throughout the process, both from the licensing and the planning team, with the greatest of respect to you guys, which I know that you know that I have. So I think that we have to take a decision afresh on the facts before us. And as you pointed out earlier, there's no precedent in planning. So whilst you've made a previous decision, we've re-looked at the issues afresh. And in my view, and that's what I'll be proposing, I consider that there isn't sufficient amenity with the use of that bedroom 3.
Would you like to make any comments?
Only to say that we consider that the smaller bedroom, to be acceptable in terms of its size. It's small, but nonetheless acceptable. We considered it to be acceptable previously, even with 1 less communal living area downstairs. So it wasn't a case that we only think it's acceptable on the basis of 2 ground floor living rooms. It was acceptable with just 1, and just to say also that even with only 1 ground floor communal living area, it still met the licensing requirements in terms of communal space.
Do we have a picture of that room? Do we have a picture of the room?
Not in my presentation, but I have got a photo that my colleague Grant will be able to. So that is the 3rd bedroom, the smallest of the bedrooms, which when I visited was unoccupied.
Thank you, Bill. Okay. Okay, moving on. There's no more speakers, is that correct? Regarding Councillor Jordan's proposal to carry on for next time, now that's fallen, I believe, because I've allowed the 2 councillors to speak, so we'll ignore that from now on and we'll move on. I'll move on now to the officer's recommendations. Sorry, Councillor Cox, you're looking at me like, is it okay? You're looking as I was going to say something. So we'll move on to the councillors' officers' recommendations for refusal. Sorry? Officers, oh, sorry, yeah, me, I was going carried away. Officers' recommendation for approval. Sorry? Yes, sorry. Could somebody move the motion, please, for officers' recommendations to approve? No, to approve. The officer's recommendation was to approve.
Sorry. Yeah, we're starting off with the officer's recommendation first.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if anyone moves the officer's recommendation to approve.
So we got no. Did you approve? Okay. Could we have recommendations to refuse? Sorry.
And reasons, please.
Sorry.
Recommendation and reasons.
Yeah, sorry. And to refuse. Councillor Howells?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would propose 2 reasons for refusal. The first being the proposed HMO includes a bedroom, in particular bedroom 3, that fails to meet the minimum space standards required to ensure the satisfactory quality of accommodation. That's contrary to the supplementary planning guidance, which I outlined earlier when I spoke, and also provides inadequate amenity for the occupiers of that room. And the second would be the application fails to provide any details of secure, covered and accessible cycle storage, which is a requirement under the parking SPG.
Okay. Is that it?
Yes.
Could I have seconder for that, please?
Seconded.
Sorry, can I add another reason for that? I don't believe that the 120-litre bin is sufficient for a 3-bedroom HMO. If you go to other HMOs, the individual bedrooms have got individual bins, and I don't think that the 120 litres is sufficient for a 3-bed HMO.
Okay. Could I have officers comment on that?
Okay. Firstly, as I said, members can vote on. We've got 2 resolutions seemingly at the moment. We've got one with 2 conditions, 2 reasons for refusal, one with 3. In terms of the cycle storage, that's something that we would normally condition. There's sufficient space there, so I think we are liable potentially to unreasonable behaviour myself if we go down that route. We've adopted that approach. You as committee members have accepted that previously. In terms of waste, note in the comments, we would need evidence that there's an issue, effectively, if you were to put that on, because we wouldn't be able to defend that at appeal, given, as I said, we've got comments from the waste officer suggesting that is sufficient and it hasn't been a problem to date. But those are my comments just before you move whichever recommendation you want.
Just careful to take note of the officer's comments as well.
Could I just come back on your point about cycle storage, which I take, but when we're often recommended to refuse applications by planning officers and there isn't a signed 106 in place, we're often told that you should include that as a reason refusal, despite the fact that they're willing to do it. And so that's why I've included the cycle provision as a reason for refusal. It might be that they can provide it, but they haven't provided it at this stage. And if it went to appeal, you wouldn't necessarily be able to put a condition on an appeal that would deal with that. So that's why I've put it in.
No, and I understand the rationale. Legal agreements are different. That's what we put these in as reasons for refusal, purely because at appeal, if we haven't, they could address every other issue apart from this. On this one, as I said, this could be reserved for condition. We couldn't condition a legal agreement. So we have to put it on, so at appeal, they can give us a unilateral undertaking and address it. So that's why a slight difference to the approach on that one, that's all.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
So can I clarify on the reasons? This is getting a bit messy now. So the reasons with the cycle, you still going with that?
So Councillor Howell's proposed a motion with 2 reasons. If you still want to propose that, that's fine.
Okay, and then Councillor...
So I think we vote on the newest motion first.
The newest motion is for the Councillor Watkins. Yeah?
I think you vote.
And a new motion for Councillor Trevor Watkins for...
So I think procedurally, we vote on the newest motion first, if someone seconds it. If not, we go back to Councillor Howell's motion. So, Councillor Watkins... Pardon? Councillor Watkins' proposed motion is for refusal on 3 reasons: lack of amenity to the bedroom, no details of secured cycle storage, and the refuse requirements 120 litre bin not sufficient. That's Councillor Watkins' motion. If anyone wants to second that, or move.
Anybody second that? Second that. Okay, so the first one will fall. I'll go along with that motion.
So the first vote now is whether to refuse for 3 reasons.
Yes. Okay. Is everybody clear? So we'll go with...
all those in favour.
All those in favour? Councillor Watkins. Yeah, with the refusal with the 3 reasons. Yes? So all those in favour of supporting Councillor Watkins? Yes, of the 3. Yes, that's correct. Okay, so you're all in favour? And myself. Okay. Thank you, that's carried then. God, that's hard work. I thought he was going to... Okay, thank you, councillors. Sorry, yeah, let's have a comfort break, will you? 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Okay, let's have a little break and I can do that. Okay.
Are we all back?
Check all councillors are back. Okay, if you can turn your cameras on.
Councillor Harvey, are you there? You're on mute.
Number 4 on the agenda. Page 51 to 74. The application number 25/0333. Site, former depot at Coverack Road, Newport, South Wales. It's in the Victoria ward, and the ward members are Councillor Hussain and Horton. Proposed development of 40 number homes and associated works. The main considerations: design and appearance, impact on the listed George Street Bridge, parking levels, amenity of occupiers and neighbours, ground contamination and piling, air pollution, habitat regulations, assessment, appropriate assessment and noise. The officer's recommendation is granted with conditions subject to Section 106 legal agreement, with delegated powers to refuse the application in the event that the agreement is not signed within 3 months of the decision. The officer presenting this would be Geraint Roberts. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. Then, so the application is proposed development of 40 number homes and associated works. So just to be clear, this is a flatted block of 31 bed flats and 10 2-bed flats. And the application is reported to committee because it's a major application. Okay, so the proposal is an application for full planning permission for a 5-storey block containing 40 number flats. The site is allocated under the adopted Newport Local Development Plan 2011 to 2026 for housing under policy H1, and it's site 64, which is the Usk side paint mills, and in the plan it's allocated for 53 units. Okay, and one other point, just to bring you up to date, is since the report was written, HENEB, which is the new name for the Glamorgan and Gwent Archaeological Trust, have confirmed that they've no objection to the proposal, so there's no archaeological reason to object to the submission that we have. Okay, in terms of the site then, the site measures 0.17 hectares. It's flat. It's located immediately southeast of the George Street Bridge, which is a Grade 2-star listed building. The site is currently cleared and not in use, being secured by a palisade fence. The former use was industrial, with the site having been cleared some time after 2006. The site is marginally set back from the River Usk, with housing to the southeast, Argosy Way, and flatter development to the northwest, these blocks being Tramway House and Bankside House. Road access is via Coverack Road out to Corporation Road, with foot access via Morris Street and the Riverside Walk, which runs along the east bank of the Usk. Okay, so the site then is here outlined in a sort of greyish colour at the centre of the slide. The pink line that you can see here is effectively the road deck of the bridge, so you can see how close the site is to the bridge structure. The river is the light blue. My cursor's disappeared temporarily. And it is also very laggy. So the river is here, where the cursor currently is. And then Argosy Way is these houses and flats in this area, so the brown and yellow coloration. Okay, so that's the site. The aerial photograph just really confirms what that map shows you. You can pick out the river much more clearly. You can see the scale of the bridge. And our site, not quite at the centre of the slide, is here. So this greyish splodge where the cursor is now. Okay, so that's the context. Across the other side, on the west bank of the river, is the student accommodation, which you can see here, and Castle Bingo. So I'm sure you're all quite familiar with this site, just through being out and about. Okay, this is the view of the site from Coverack Road. So you can see the palisade fence that we mentioned, which went around the factory historically. You can see the retained slab on the site where the buildings were cleared. And you can see the sweep of the bridge, particularly the pylons, which are the most obvious vertical feature of that. And in the background on the left-hand side of that photograph, you can see the student accommodation on the other side of the river. Okay, so that is a current view of the site, which gives you an idea of the setting and general proximity. Okay, in terms of the views from the road deck, I've actually taken a picture of what is already there, because the relationship between the proposed block of flats and the bridge will be quite similar to the block that you can see in that photograph. So this is currently there. In appearance, the proposed block is also quite similar, which we'll come on to into a moment, but that gives you an idea of the relationship with the bridge structure. So you can see the support cables running in more or less in the centre of the photograph, and that is what you would see from the bridge deck if you were driving, and more so if you were walking, okay, along the footway. Okay, in terms of that relationship with the bridge then, which was a point of some concern to us, and that existing arrangement with the existing block of flats, this drawing is quite useful to us. So the red line that you can see on the slide is the top of the taller block, the one we were just looking at in the photograph. You can see the height of the pylons relatively to that, and then you can see the new block proposed to the right-hand side of the bridge structure. And you can see it is slightly lower than the existing block, but not hugely so. And it is slightly closer to the bridge, but not hugely so. And then the block on the right-hand side is the block of flats at the northern end of Argosy Way, and we saw the footprint of that on the map slide that we looked at. Okay, so that's the relationship with the bridge structure and the other buildings which are immediately close to it. Okay, same view but from the side. So if this was, this is what you would effectively see from Coverack Road. So you can see the side elevation of the proposed building, and you can see its relationship with the bridge. So although it is a hefty structure of itself, it's a block of flats after all, in comparison to the bridge, it is of relatively small scale. So these buildings give you that concept of the scale of it. And just to give you an indication, I think these units here are meant to be Morris Street, so there are typical two-storey terraced buildings here. So it just gives you an idea of the scale of the proposal. Okay, the applicant's given us some 3D renderings which are quite helpful here. So this is the view north along the Riverside Walk. If you were moving that way towards the city centre, you can see the side elevation. You can see that it's not entirely blank because there is some material differentiation, there is cladding of two types. There is brick and there is some fenestration in that side elevation. So it's not quite so plain as you might imagine from the first drawing we saw. And it also gives you an idea of the context, again, with the bridge structure and how it will sit adjacent to the bridge. Okay, this is a view from further back from Coverac Road, so a little bit inland, more or less facing the river, but again, it gives you an idea of how much of a bridge would be obscured if a structure is put into place. And it gives you an idea of a relationship with the adjacent block of flats on Argosy Way, which is this building here on the left-hand side of the slide. Okay, and in the background, again, just for context, that is the top of the existing block of flats that you can see there. So it just gives you an idea of how this block will sit in the landscape around it. Sorry, we skipped a slide. Okay, layout drawing then. Much as you would anticipate from those slides that you've just been looking at, effectively fronting the river with a small area of landscaping to the front of the building. So the river would be to the left of that slide and inland is to the right. And then behind the building you can see the proposed parking areas. This road here is already there and it goes under the bridge and it helps serve those existing blocks to the north. So road access is via Coverac Road to all of these units. So effectively, this could almost be read as an extension of the existing two blocks. They're calling it Phase 2, the applicant. So it will be social housing by the same developer as the blocks which are currently present. Okay, parking to the rear then, as you can see around that courtyard basis. And then, sorry, I'm trying to get my cursor to reappear. I'm struggling. There we are, yeah. So here at the bottom of the slide is the proposed bin store. We don't have a great deal of detail on that. We're unconcerned on that point because we can seek that additional detail through conditions, but we are broadly satisfied that there is sufficient room to provide sufficient capacity for storage of waste and recycling, and that the waste team can reasonably access that structure in the future. Okay, what we also have is a proposed covered bicycle store, which would be here. Again, we don't have details, but we're satisfied that we can seek those under condition. And they would put some visitor cycle parking near to the entrance of the building by installing some bike hoops. So we're happy that those elements can be addressed subsequently. Okay, building is accessed from the rear then. So the main entrance is actually on the back of it. It makes sense because that's where the parking is, and obviously many of the people will be accessing from the Coverac Road side. Okay, so we're not concerned that the front entrance isn't on the front, if you like, on this occasion. Okay. In terms of what it will look like then, very similar to what is there, a mixture of brick, a mixture of cladding of various types, but very, very similar to the existing structures which we've already seen, so I won't overwork that. One thing to mention, though, is the provision of external balconies to all of the units. So they will all have some private outside space, which is something that we are very much in favour of on new build flats, particularly since COVID, where people didn't necessarily have access to public outdoor space. But that standard is met. So this is the side elevation again. It just reiterates that cladding treatment, and you can see the balconies are there also. And this, not particularly clear, but it just gives you an idea of the internal layout. So this is one of the upper floors. The white areas are effectively the circulation spaces. The yellowish coloured flats are the two-bedroom ones, and the brown ones are the single-bedroom flats. Okay, and the flats provide all the relevant space and necessities for everyday occupation. So we're satisfied that they meet the relevant standards size-wise. Okay then, in terms of the key issues then, the impact on the listed George Street Bridge was a concern to us. Anything that affects the setting of a listed building is by necessity important, because the legal test, which is set out in your report pack, makes it clear that any impact on the setting of a listed building, any adverse setting at least, is capable of bearing significant weight in a planning decision. But you'll appreciate we've considered the scale of this building, its location adjacent to the bridge, and the impact upon the views that we might have of the bridge. And although there is some impact on setting, it isn't going to block any key views or views that wouldn't be available from elsewhere in the city. So we're satisfied that the effect on the listed bridge is acceptable and it's been considered. Right, design and appearance then, well, you've seen it. We judge it to be acceptable, so I won't labour that point because you've had the benefit of the slides. Parking levels is worthy of having some time spent upon it. They are providing 32 spaces for 40 flats, 10 of which are 2 bedrooms, so you'll immediately appreciate that it is deficient in parking when compared to our supplementary planning guidance. So it is short of 16 spaces within the context of this scheme. But what the applicant has done is they have considered it in the round with the other 2 blocks of flats, and what they've demonstrated is that there is a 0.64 occupancy per flat, which effectively means that each flat that's already there is generating 0.6 vehicles, i.e. less than 1. And when you do that, in the round it means that the whole scheme, all 3 blocks, this one, and the 2 which are already there, would provide 109 spaces for 116 flats. So we're getting closer to the 1-to-1 ratio. And when we look at our SPG, that means overall, within the scheme, there would be a total deficiency of 30 spaces. But they have provided good evidence that the occupancy of that car park is low, less than 1 car per flat. And if they're correct, and there's no reason to think that they are not, then the requirement for the total scheme is 74 spaces, and they are providing 109. Okay, so the highways officer has looked at this in the round and said, yes, I agree, the parking is sufficient in this case. All right, it's not compliant with the SPG, but they've given us good evidence to accept that it's sufficient. Okay, so if there's any points on that, we can discuss them later, but we are satisfied the parking level is enough given this particular set of circumstances. Okay, in terms of the amenity of occupiers then, we noted that floor areas meet our SPG requirement for new dwellings, and they also meet the DQR standards set out by the Welsh Government. That's important because these are proposed to be affordable units, meaning that if they're to get grant, they have to meet the national standard as well as their own, and they do. Okay, in terms of the neighbours, the amenity of neighbours, we're confident that overlooking, shade, overbearing effect, none of these are significant concerns to us. Okay? Even though it's a substantial building, we're satisfied that we would not have any unacceptable impact on the amenity of existing neighbours. In terms of ground contamination and piling, then, the site is contaminated. That is known, but again, we are satisfied that subject to conditions that can be adequately dealt with, sufficient to protect the future, sufficient to protect human health, the future occupiers, and also sufficient to address the nature conservation interest of the River Usk, which you'll appreciate is very close to the site. So we're satisfied that that risk can be acceptably managed under condition, and so are NRW. Air pollution was raised by the applicant, but this is not in an air quality management area, nor is it in an air quality management area buffer, but it is very close to the road deck of the road, which you'll have appreciated, and that is why the applicant has raised it. But we are satisfied that air quality is not a reason to withhold permission. Effectively, the air quality is satisfactory, and we don't see any risk to the well-being and health of future occupiers from that issue. Okay, nor do we think that the traffic generation from this scheme would have any significant impact on any existing air quality management area. So we're satisfied that is not an issue to concern us. In terms of the river itself, then, that is a SAC. It's got a very high level of protection for its ecology, effectively. Okay, it's a special area of conservation, a SAC. The applicant has undertaken a habitat regulations assessment and has basically demonstrated that the scheme will have no unacceptable impact on the river, subject to the application of a suite of conditions which we have applied. So we're satisfied that the nature conservation interest of the Usk and its special characteristics can be looked after, subject to the conditional regime being applied. Okay, noise, cooling and ventilation. This is a noise-affected site. You'll have immediately realised that from the proximity of the road deck. But again, subject to conditions controlling glazing and construction, we're satisfied that can be dealt with. You'll immediately appreciate there is nothing we can do to mitigate noise on the outdoor balconies. If you're outside, it will be noisy, but you will have a choice. You can go outside onto your private space. So we would rather that than have no balconies, if that makes sense. Okay. Cooling and ventilation, again, increasingly a concern as summers grow hotter. Again, we're satisfied subject to conditions that can be dealt with. Okay, moving on to other issues. The site is adjacent to the river. However, it is actually outside the flood risk area. Because the site has been raised historically, it will not flood. However, areas beyond it, towards Corporation Road, would be at risk of inundation. So should the flood defence fail or be overtopped, this will be an island. Okay? It will be dry, but surrounding it will be flooded. So you will be stuck on that site until such a time that the flood recedes. But there is normally one tide cycle, i.e. when the tide starts going out, the flood goes down, and then you can safely evacuate the premises. So there is a small risk to occupiers being marooned on this island for some hours before they can be safely rescued from this locality. However, we're satisfied that that is a small risk, and when balanced out against the benefits of regenerating the site and providing affordable homes to people in Newport, that is a risk that is outweighed significantly in the consideration of this application. Okay, so I say the key issue, the site is dry. Okay, moving on from that, then we have other issues relating to biodiversity, external lighting, surface water drainage, details of waste and recycling, which I've mentioned, details of boundary treatments, all of which we think can be dealt with under the conditions suggested in your report. So I won't labour those points. And as noted, archaeology, HENEB, formerly GGAT, have not objected. So overall, we advise that permission is granted, subject to conditions. There is a requirement for a Section 106 legal agreement, and what that does is safeguard the Council's position should any of these units not be delivered as affordable units, in which case we can then seek the required contributions under Section 106. But if the applicant does deliver all of the units as affordable, they would pay nothing, in effect. If they didn't, then they would be bound by the agreement and would have to make the requisite contributions. So, again, if that's not clear, you can ask. But as I say, overall, in the round, we consider that permission should be granted subject to the conditions in your report pack. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kieran. Can I put this to the floor, please, the members? Anybody who'd like wish to speak? Councillor Watkins?
Thank you, Karen. Could you go back to the floor plan, please, of the building? Oh, no, not the one there. That one there. Go on to the next one. No, the floor plan. One showing the waste, that's the one there. How are they going to get the waste into the vehicles from that position? You've got parking facilities there in front of, as you turn left into the property, you've got parking facilities on the left-hand side. At the back of that, you've got the waste disposal, where the bins are storage. Right, how are the waste people going to get those bins from there?
The layout plan is showing, I say we don't have the full details of the building, but we've conditioned that we should have them. Right, so they're showing the storage of the bins in here. All right, now that could be a building, it could be an enclosure, I don't know, but we've said tell us what it will be and we'll agree it. It's showing a series of double doors which are opening out onto this footway at the back of the parking spaces. Okay, so the crew have the opportunity to drag the bins from that locality to the truck. The drag distances appear satisfactory in my mind. It is a flat site. We can, if committee is minded, condition that not so much details of the building as a waste management plan. You may have to give us more in terms of how they will service that building and get to it. We have consulted Waste. We haven't received a comment from them, so they haven't said anything. We have chased up as well, and they still haven't said anything, because if they did, we would have told you.
As long as there's facilities for the waste disposal people to remove those bins from there and put them onto the vehicle, that's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah, so you would advise a waste management plan condition to explain exactly how that will be serviced. Yeah, no, that's fine. We can do that.
Okay. One other question, if I may, Chair. It says something about EV charging. I don't see anything, only it's mentioned. It doesn't tell me how many charging points are going to be there. Do we know? Or is every point going to be charged?
On residential schemes, there is no national policy requirement to provide any. It's 10% on commercial. That's a given. What we have normally done, again, under the basis of policy SP1, our sustainability policy, is sort of scheme where we would ask for details of minimally passive provision. And what we mean by passive provision is you put the wires in. You don't necessarily put the chargers in, but you put the cabling in so that if anyone subsequently needs to install chargers, they can do it easily without basically digging up the car park. This is to try and future-proof the scheme and mean that if any resident should own ultra-low emission vehicles, ULEVs, that they will have a reasonable potential to provide the infrastructure to service those cost-effectively and straightforwardly.
Anybody else? Don't see any hands up. Okay. We'll move forward for the officer's recommendation to grant the application with conditions subject to the Section 106 legal agreements, delegated powers. Could I take a vote? All those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Sorry. To move the recommendation. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Howell, seconder. Councillor, I'll go with Perkins this time. Okay, thank you. Those against? I just did, didn't I? All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Oh, I'll vote for. Okay. I don't think there's any appeal. No, any appeals? No? That's it? That's the end. Right, thank you very much for all tuning up. Sorry?
If I may, please, just clarification if I can get it. It's the last one on the list, and it says change of use from a dwelling of 6-bedroom house with multiple occupations, C4, and it got the appeal was dismissed. Do we know the reason why it was dismissed, the
appeal? Have you got the reference there? Sorry, I've opened the wrong agenda.
Reference 24//0372.
Sorry,
Queen's Hill.
Queen's Hill. What's the property? Is it number 12?
Number 12, yeah. I wondered why the appeal was dismissed and the reasons why we turned it down.
Okay, so we refused this one under delegated powers. It was because the threshold had been breached when we considered taking that one HMO exceeded the threshold. Notwithstanding that, there were 2 other HMOs in close proximity. So we said, firstly, there's a breach, therefore we think it's unacceptable, and notwithstanding that, there's also some in really close proximity, the next 2 properties up. And the inspector went with that in terms of the whole argument that we've been having, which is why, from a social cohesion perspective, there's a tipping point, which is why we have the thresholds. That threshold was breached. We recommended refusal, and thankfully, the inspectorate went with us on it. Yeah. I think it was circulated, but if not, I will circulate it to planning committee members, just so you're aware. Yeah, we were happy with that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
Andrew, could you just provide an update on the Bellway Homes issue that was ongoing with the enforcement notice?
I can indeed. So we sought to prosecute Bellway Homes for non-compliance breach of condition. That went to court, effectively. Now, because it was a criminal trial, there's a very high threshold for prosecution. Bellway were found not guilty, which was unfortunate because, as I said, from our perspective, it was relatively clear-cut. But they managed to put an argument together that the works that were being undertaken was remediation rather than construction. And the court found that there was a potential for that. Given the high threshold, they said that we, as a council, hadn't proven our case that there had been a clear breach. So we had legal counsel representing us. They've given us good feedback in terms of what we could have done at different points to make sure our case was stronger. So, yeah, it's, as I said, it's unfortunate, regrettable. We'll learn from it going forward.
And sort of has some of the things that we were requiring them to do to sort of resolve the discharge into the sort of readings, has that been resolved now, though? Or?
Yeah, so we during the course of the application, they requested several adjournments. One of those we think was, from our perspective, seemed to be a bit of a stalling tactic so they could get the details approved. So we were seeking to, so we served the breach of condition notice because they continued to develop without resolving the details. They've subsequently resolved those details. So there's a technical breach which we thought was important to pursue. But as I said, they've resolved the issues behind the scenes, notwithstanding that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you, officers and members. Right, bye.